Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 130 of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells. I've got Mike Koomar with me. And, Mike, we are in the thick of it here in Championship Week. Currently, as of right now, it's 9:38 Eastern Time on Thursday. We've multiple quarterfinals played today, multiple semifinals today. And, Mike, we're going to go to an interesting place for our first topic here. We're going to go to the Mid-American Conference. The MAC Championship started today. Its first quarterfinal had 31-0 Miami, Ohio at 11 a.m. against UMass. And it was the Minutemen that pulled off the victory. The Redhawks are no longer undefeated. UMass wins 87-83. I think it's fair to say, Mike, that this was probably coming for the Redhawks. They had played so many close games in a row, 7 straight wins by less than 5 points. And they found themselves in another coin toss game, and unfortunately, it went the wrong way. But what were your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think initially, yeah, we definitely saw this coming. I could have seen this. I had this game circled for upset the entire week when we figured out that UMass was playing Miami. Look, UMass, despite being in the middle of the conference, really gave Miami of Ohio a run for their money every single time they played. It took overtime for Miami of Ohio to beat them at home before Miami of Ohio was able to win on the road. But in this one, look, they just got outplayed and outcoached. It wasn't really a lights out shooting performance for UMass. It's not like Miami couldn't score the ball either, but UMass was just dominant on the boards in this one. They were able to get a lot of twos, 35 field goals made in this game. And they weren't making shots from behind the arc. They weren't making a ton of free throws. They just
54
got a
points
lot
in
of
the
good
paint.
looks. Plus 17 on the boards, Sean. Plus 17. So this was a game that UMass really just took and was dominant in. Look, I understand that Miami probably didn't have their best stuff. I don't even know if they Peter Suter only had 10 points in this game. He didn't have his best. And if Miami of Ohio is going to do any damage in March, Peter Suter is going to have some big time performances. This certainly was not one of them.
Yeah, this was just disappointing. Like, they were leading by 10 in the second half. It looked like they were going to pull away. And then I don't know if the nerves got to them or I was watching 5 different games at the same time. But every time I look back, I'm like, oh, 7, it's 4. Like, is this really going to happen again for Miami? And then UMass just really executed down the stretch in the last 2 minutes. And then Miami, key turnover at the end of the shot clock. And they lost. But, Mike, I actually think that Miami didn't play that bad here. They shot it at 48%. They hit 12 threes. Offensively, like, they made shots. This wasn't like a total awful day for them. Defensively, it was horrible, and they're going to have to be better. And then, it looks like the conversation that we have been, or not we, but other people in this space and casual sports fans have been having all year is going to come up. Miami is now no longer going to get an automatic bid. They're being thrust into the at-large pool. And I have not done a full projection since they did lose, but some numbers have been updated, and Mike, I think they're still going to get in, but it might be a trip to Dayton for a first 4 game.
Yeah, I think one benefit for the Miami of Ohio is that the bubble has just not been very impressive this
Yeah,
year. Teams just continue to lose. Auburn was another one that maybe could have challenged them, but Auburn coughed up a nice little first half lead they had against Tennessee, and they're going to go into Selection Sunday just one game above 500 for the season with some pretty rough SEC play. Look, I think they absolutely deserve to be in. Their undefeated regular season is incredibly hard to do, especially when you're playing 31 games in a regular season. So we'll see where the committee values that. Sometimes, quantity of wins over quality of wins. We'll see what happens here. But I think with the lack of performance from the bubble, especially so far in March and in conference championships, I think they're going to get in.
so they did enter the day at 31st in the WAB, the wins against the bubble. That is the committee's brand new metric that was first put in last year, and they pretty much went by that. The only team that did not make it that was above a team that did make it on the bubble was West Virginia, and Indiana were above North Carolina last year. So if that's any indication, Mike, I last time I checked, Miami has dropped down to 39th in the net in the WAB. The It doesn't update until the next day on the NCAA website with the net. So, um, I would expect it around 40, but I do think that that is going to be enough to get them in. Um,
Yeah.
Especially like you said, the teams in the bubble have not been playing very well. This brings Miami down to about a 1 WAB right now, and there are some teams below them that are going to get in. So I think they're okay to get in. But you look at the right column here on the bracketology sheet that I'm showing, and those numbers are 91, 91, and 85. Those are the predictive metrics, and this is not counting the game that they had lost today. So the predictives, I think you can't put them anywhere else other than Dayton, but the WAB shows that they should be there. The strength of record, which was 21 at the beginning of the day, that would be pretty unprecedented to leave them out. And Mike, I
Yeah.
do think that there is probably a legit case to leave them out if the bubble has not been so poor the last few weeks. Like if it had been a regular bubble, I think they might get left out, but I think they're going to
Yeah,
make
but
it.
you also got to keep into effect they had an
Yeah.
undefeated basketball season,
Yep.
and,
Yeah.
and at some point the metrics they might not tell the story of an undefeated regular season, but the committee's got to value that you won every single one of your scheduled games.
And uh, on this point of view, I think you do have to punish quad four losses more if you're going to reward Miami, Ohio for winning 15 of them. Now, at this moment, the UMass game is a quad four loss, but assuming that they're going to go up significantly in the net, and there's a decent chance that that goes to quad three, and of course they can
Yeah.
keep playing and improving that even further. But that is something that I'm looking out for here. Is I'm trying to find a spot to put Miami, Ohio. They're going to go down in the net, probably into the 60s. That's not totally unprecedented. You see some bubble teams up higher on the bubble or on the bracketology sheet here. You've got teams in the 50s, that are being considered. Missouri lost today to Kentucky. They're at 59th in the net, so the net shouldn't be holding them back. But it is going to be something, and I think they are going to be headed to Dayton, Mike, and really that's all they can hope for at this point. Um, they're going to get a chance to prove that they can play against a tournament team. Um,
Yeah.
Now, it might not go the way that they want it to, and I wouldn't suggest people expecting Miami to win, but I think they're going to get in for now. They are 28-1 according to the committee. That they don't D2 games don't count towards the record. So if you see them referred to as 28-1 places, that is why. But we had to start off with that one, Mike, because that was it was literally the first game of the day that tipped. I think maybe the
Yeah.
A10 first game started at the same time, but
Biggest
you
storyline
know
of the day too.
the biggest hypothetical that we have been talking about for a while, unfortunately for Miami, has come true. All right, Mike, you did preface this a little bit earlier when we were talking about it, but the bubble teams keep losing. Um, Pretty much all of them. There's one basically team on the bubble that's been playing well recently. That's the Ohio State Buckeyes, and they've shot off the bubble. They're nowhere even close. I think they might be an 8 seed at tomorrow's projection, but
Yeah.
here was the most recent um, bubble that I did. This was a little bit earlier in the day, and my last four in does include the Red Hawks of Miami. Just need to move this over. 1 second. It's Miami, VCU, Texas, and SMU. I moved SMU back into the field for Auburn. Auburn did finish 17-16, like we thought they might. But is this how do you see these three teams? VCU has obviously not played yet in the Atlantic 10. They will play tomorrow. Texas one and done against Ole Miss, and SMU was one and done with an injury risk. At this point, Mike, none of these teams can be feeling super confident about their fate on Sunday, but after all, somebody does have to go here.
Absolutely. I think you look at VCU, that's a curious case right now. We haven't talked about them much this year, but they're currently 5-7 right now in quad one and quad two games, undefeated in the third and fourth quad, with their best wins coming against South Florida and away at Dayton. Um, Look, they don't have the quality wins in the resume that a whole lot of other schools have, but they've won all of the games that they're supposed to. So I think they really need to show what they can do in the Atlantic 10 this weekend. They got to get started on the right pace. So there's a couple teams right here on the bubble, Sean, that have a really big chance to prove something. VCU is one of them. I think they got to really get to the championship game to make a statement. But then also Seton Hall, what an opportunity that they're going to have tomorrow at the Garden. I know it's going to be considered a neutral game, but it's St. John's home turf, and they're going to be able to try to pull off a stunning upset and get to the finals. That could really propel them forward. And then finally, the Lobos of New Mexico. I think they're at a spot where they probably have to win the Mountain West to get in, just because of you know, there's just not that many quality wins for them between now and then. But with that being said, I think those three are going to be really curious teams that we're going to keep an eye on this weekend.
Yeah, the first to do the first four out at this point is pretty difficult because
Yeah.
Auburn and Indiana are done and they can't do anything to move up, and the only thing
Yeah.
that can happen is that another spot can be taken by the Mountain West winner if it's not Utah State or the A10 or the Big East. So I think Auburn and Indiana are done right now. And then I put these two other spots there for opportunities, basically. I think Virginia Tech and Cal are probably ahead of these two teams right now, but they are both done playing. In
Yeah.
terms of Oklahoma, they're still going. They are either have just started or are about to start. So it's kind of hard to do the first four out. I think at the end of the day, if you're out, you're out. So it doesn't really matter. But obviously, there's some teams that could still play their way back into contention. Seton Hall, is a very interesting one. They might need to win the Big East just because they've had 6 opportunities against tournament quality opposition in the Big East. They've lost all of them, and then they went 10-4 against the non-tournament teams in the Big East. So, well, 11-4 now with the win against Creighton today. I think they probably have to win it. It would really help them if somebody took out UConn and they didn't have to play St. John's and UConn on back-to-back days if they were able to beat them. But in terms of the bubble, this is where I have it right now. This is sort of not. This is sort of a guess, looking at how the numbers are, because I don't know where the WAB sits. I don't know where the net rankings sit. I think Miami and VCU are a little bit away right now from the last 2 spots in, being Texas and SMU. SMU's had a injury to BJ Edwards. They have won 1 basketball game without him, and that was the first round of the ACC tournament before they bowed out to Louisville yesterday. And then Auburn 17-16, Indiana's 18-14. No reason to select either of those teams right now. So the bubble could really clear itself up, Mike, if a couple more of these spots disappear.
Yeah, and I think one team I really want to highlight that during Champ Week put their way into the tournament, signed, sealed, delivered. They're going right now is Santa Clara.
Yeah.
Santa Clara, they came in, they were 100% on the bubble.
Oops.
They had to win a couple games to get there. They almost got the auto bid. They fell short against Gonzaga, but got their second win of the season against St. Mary's. Before that, getting a win against Oregon State. So they earned their way into the big dance. And I'm excited to see them this year. That's really the only team that stuck out to being like, oh, wow, they really played their way in. Obviously, Oklahoma still has plenty of time left to sneak in. San Diego State, VCU, New Mexico, Seton Hall. Those are really the 5 teams that we're looking at the rest of the way. But hey, it's going to be pretty interesting to see where the committee would rank Miami of Ohio versus Akron, I think, is another one when you look at the bubble, because Akron's got a chance of getting an automatic bid. Would Akron potentially be seated above Miami of Ohio? Even though Akron lost to them by a couple points this year on the road, they're
I would
a really
think
good basketball team and ranked ahead of them in the net rankings.
I would think maybe, Mike.
Yeah,
Maybe Akron jumps to an 11 and we see a 12 seed play in game, which we have seen in the past. Maybe South Florida can jump them too. But yeah, it's weird because everything suggests that Akron is the better team, except
yeah.
for that one game that
Except
they
for the game.
lost in
Yeah,
Oxford, which, obviously I think head to head matters less in basketball than it does in football because there's more data. But yeah, that is something that
gotta matter some.
that
Yeah,
will. Yeah, and if Akron's a 12 seed, Miami's an 11. That's not fair to the Zips and John Gross either, because they
no,
they will have played better over the course of the MAC season, including the tournament, if they win it. So
Yeah.
that is something to look out for. In terms of the West Coast Conference, Mike, over the years, we've had a couple of bubble teams from this conference, and it's really been a negative that they have finished so early, and they've sort of had their spot taken by some late surgers. We remember it with Indiana State a couple years ago. They lost the championship game, Drake, and then basically there were a bunch more bid stealers and people playing their way in, and all of a sudden Indiana State was out. Total opposite this year. Total opposite.
Yeah.
Santa Clara wins the game that they needed to be to stretch away from that last four ed, and they're just watching everybody else trip on their shoelaces, and Santa
Yeah.
Clara is probably going to be on the 10 line for me. I think they might be an 11 seed that's not playing in Dayton, but their resume looks a whole lot better than it did since they last played, which isn't always the case, especially on the bubble. But yeah, you mentioned a couple of those other teams, Mike, that are still alive in their conference tournaments, and obviously that means that you still have a chance. And then some of those other teams that they probably need to win some more, like Oklahoma, but especially if it's a Sunday championship game and they're sitting there, they might not have to win that. We
Yeah.
have not. We have. I think we saw it in the A10 once. We saw a Sunday championship game where both teams were in, and one of them was on the bubble. But yeah, bubble is a mess. There, we actually did have one spot disappear today. Like I said, Auburn probably would have been in the projection, if not for UMass earlier today. But all right, Mike, we're checking off some of the topics here. Let's go to the Big 12 for a second. And let's talk about the first game of the day, I believe. That was
Yep.
between the Texas Tech Red Raiders and the Iowa State Cyclones. This was not a result like the time we saw these two teams play last. It's a Cyclone domination in the second half. Iowa State wins 75-53. Couple worrying signs here from Texas Tech. Iowa State is rolling. What were your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think this one, look, this game was really tight going into halftime, a 3-point game. It was actually tied with about, until the last possession, really, of the first half. And then all of a sudden, this game just blew wide open. Texas Tech got really cold, and Iowa State got off to a pretty monster run. And all of a sudden, you blink, and Iowa State's up by 20 points. I think Texas Tech only scored 6 points in the first 10 minutes of the second half. It was a 23-6 run for them. I think the big concern right around then is Christian Anderson going down with an injury. Looked like he slipped on what is that odd surface that they're playing the Big 12 tournament on. It's already been said to be more bouncy, but more slippery as well. And it seemed that Christian Anderson was a victim to that. It sounds like he's going to be okay, but he did not play in the last several minutes of this game, probably mostly in part because Texas Tech was out of it by then. But Iowa State just puts a beating down. This is really their tournament. They always come together and play good basketball in front of a home crowd. They call it Hilton South for a reason, right? There's three teams. We go over this every year. There's three teams at this Kansas City Big 12 tournament really has an advantage for. The other teams not so much, but Iowa State consistently takes advantage of this opportunity that they've got. They're going to play Arizona in the semis tomorrow. That's going to be a really good one. But the Cyclones, they're rolling right now. They look really good, and they look really comfortable. Great defensive effort, too.
Yeah, it was just a completely different story from what we saw 13 days ago at the actual Hilton Coliseum, where Texas Tech went in there and took a big lead early and never really looked back. But this was just one of those situations for Texas Tech, like the hand that they have been dealt here at the end of the season. It's not very good. At the end of the day, it's probably better for them that they were one and done in this tournament. Let's just get out of there without losing any more players, and let's try and get to the NCAA tournament, and maybe we can win a couple games. I don't know how the committee is going to deal with them. Since Toppin has been out, they have just 2 wins, but one of them was at Iowa State, and then the other one was
Cincinnati.
at Arizona, I believe, or no, Cincinnati.
Cincinnati at home. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So look, I mean, can you punish? They're clearly not as good as they were with him. So we saw the Red Raiders on the 3 line in some projections. I think we might be sinking towards a 5 right now. Um, there is like that sort of last, there's been sort of a revolving door, at least for me, in that last 4 seed spot. And I think you might just say, okay, like all those teams can be forced. Let's just bring Texas Tech to the 5. Because they're not as good without them. And unfortunately for them, that has been exposed a little bit here. But going to be good for them to get back to Lubbock and get out of there with just playing one game, I think. And then in terms of Iowa State, Mike, I do think the 5 seed might be the best draw in like a pretty even league because you can get one game under your belt against a 12
Yeah.
or higher seed. It shouldn't be all that difficult, and it wasn't for Iowa State. They took a huge lead against Arizona State, and it got pretty ugly there. And then you've already played. You talked about the odd circumstances of the floor. You've already played not at once. Texas Tech's rolling in there for the first time. You're able to beat them, and then look,
Yeah.
now it becomes a little difficult with the number 1 seed tomorrow night, but they're coming off of
You
a
know,
game too.
the seed game is an interesting one, right? Like you think about this even in March Madness. Like statistically, you would rather have an 11 seed than have an 8 seed in the tournament,
Especially
right?
this
Because
year.
if you win your first game in the NCAA tournament as an 8 seed, guess what? You're playing one of the top 4 teams in the country. Not the same case if you're the 11 seed, you can pull off an upset against a pretty vulnerable 6 seeded team like most of them are. That's why we see plenty of 11 seeds in the Sweet 16 historically. Similar here in the Big 12. I think you look at that 5 seed line, and it's just like it's a green light wide open because you get your cupcake game early, right? And they got that. They annihilated Arizona State. If it was Baylor, based off of what we saw, they probably would have run Baylor out of the gym as well. And it gives you that little confidence before you're going to play one of the top teams in the country in Arizona. The Cyclones are still playing for a good amount of things here.
Yeah.
If they can lock up a 2 seed right now, that would be huge for their tournament chances coming down the stretch.
They I think it really benefits you if you can like absorb the extra game. Like Iowa State plays,
Yeah,
8, 9 players pretty consistently. If you have a 6
yeah,
or 7 man rotation, probably not. The extra game would probably wear on you, but Iowa State is usually the team that does the wearing down. So I think this has really benefited them. Obviously, getting them in the first slot of the day now, 3 days in a row, is going to be like it's just great for the attendance of the tournament. Like to have the first game of the
yeah.
day packed. Obviously, that worked out pretty well for them. Um, but yeah, it's been an interesting Big 12 tournament. I think it's been pretty cool. We just saw a great game finish up before we clicked record, Mike, between BYU and Houston, and the
Yeah.
Cougars gave them everything they could handle, but Houston comes
That was
out on top.
surprising. Yeah,
Where is
that
it?
really surprised me. I thought Houston was going to kind of run away with that one, and BYU wasn't going to have enough juice. But look, another great performance by DeBonsa. Robert Wright had a fantastic game in that one, 15-5, and they got some, it's minutes at least off the bench, and that's big for them. And they were able to hang with Houston defensively, and I think that's part of the battle with the Cougars. So. Yeah, kudos to BYU for playing a phenomenal game. Unfortunately for them, they're just not going to come out on top, and
And
they're going to be in an interesting spot on Sunday, especially with one of their stars, Richie Saunders, out for the rest of the year.
they I think it might not be the worst thing that they lost this game, Mike, because they really don't need another game. Like, and I'm not saying that they've looked like really fatigued or anything, but this was their 3rd game. They were the 10 seed, remember? So they had to play that
Yeah,
first day, and then they played West Virginia yesterday. A 4th game would have been really tough, but you got in a close game, and I still would take them in close games against most teams with their ability to hit isolation.
yeah,
And I thought Dabanza got a pretty bad whistle here. I think they missed a lot of calls for him. And I think on another day they could have probably snuck this game out had they not played 2 days in a row before while Houston had just gotten off the plane. So I was pretty impressed with BYU here. Look, they're like Texas Tech. The situation is the situation here that their most important or most connected player is out, and It's going to be interesting where BYU is. We've talked about how they really can't be an 8 or a 9 seed unless some things are switched around, like Michigan's preferred location or something like that. And I think they've done enough to get ahead of the 8 or 9 seed. I think they're probably going to be on my 7 line tomorrow, maybe even a 6 um, after
Yeah.
these wins. But I don't think they have crazy depth. I don't know if a Final Four run is on the cards, but with the hand that they've been dealt, I think they're going in feeling pretty confident.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, let's go to the ACC for a second, Mike. Sneakily, one of the best games of the day was the second game of the afternoon slate. It was Miami against Louisville. Um, Louisville, snuck past a struggling SMU team yesterday, and Miami. Um, this was their first game of the tournament. It was neck and neck the entire way. Could have gone either way, but it's Jai Lucas and the Hurricanes that get across the line, 78-73. Uh, Mike, my main takeaway here was just Miami's just a good basketball team, and Louisville's incredibly inconsistent up and down. They were not able to string enough stops and buckets together to win this game, and Miami is going to have a chance to play in a semifinal tomorrow. I'm very impressed with the Hurricanes.
Yeah, I don't know if they've announced Coach of the Year right now in the ACC, but I really do think it's got to go to Jai Lucas in this one. I mean, his ability to turn around Miami from the literal doormat in the ACC last year to the third best team in the conference. Look, they just got punched in the mouth a few days earlier against Louisville on their senior day, and they were able to get to the tournament, regroup, and reciprocate what they were given to Louisville earlier on. So look, it's just a phenomenal turnaround job that he's had 25 wins now on the season. And I know they're not currently ranked by the AP, but you
Yeah,
got
it's
to love their
silly.
chances of getting a 5 seed in the NCAA tournament right now. They're getting good production off of their bench as well. True Washington, 17 points in this one, was their second leading scorer. But Malik Reneau is really the story of this team right now. 24 points in this one. He looked really good, had 6 rebounds as well against just 3 turnovers. So this is just a really good, complete team for Miami. And it's no wonder, with NIL capabilities, Miami should always be good at basketball. But this is just still a tremendous turnaround job by Jai Lucas.
Yeah, I think the metrics and the numbers have been lacking a little bit with Miami, and it did take them a while to beat a tournament team, but I think I had them on my 7 line. But every win that they get against a tournament quality team means a lot for them because it is what was initially a weakness in their resume is now not. And if they can make that a
Yeah.
strength, that's even bigger of a strength there. Let's put these two teams side by side here um, for the resume reasons. And this does not include today's game. Louisville's resume is awfully similar to last year, Mike, where, if you remember, we were shocked when they were thrown on the 8 line. They do have a Quad 1A
Yeah.
win. They do have 6 Quad 1B wins. They're 13th across the predictives and 13th in the net, which is shockingly high. And their resume metrics are still pretty good, too. They rank inside the top 25 there. So I think it would be really hard for Louisville to get any worse than a 6 seed. It's just they've got so many, check marks if you're comparing against the teams below them. And then in terms of Miami, they came into the day 32nd in the net, Mike. That is probably going into the 20s. The predictives are lacking a little bit, but this is going to be their third Quad 1A win, their sixth Quad 1 win. They're going to be over 500 in Quad 1. 12 and 7 in the top 2 quads. Like, this Miami team is a team that could continue to rise up the seed list if they're able to win again tomorrow against a Virginia team that's up there in Quad 1A too. So I think not only is Miami going to feel confident about how they're playing going into the tournament, but I think they can be pretty confident about their seed here. I think
Yeah.
it might be a little bit of a reach to get to a 5, but I think a 6 is certainly on the table. And the reporting from the committee today, Mike, earlier in the day, was that they have voted 33 teams into the field and they have seeded the top 3 seed lines. Now, of course, the whole, they can still change them if they want conversation comes about, but You know they won't unless somebody gets badly injured. Um, so
Badly
that
injured, or Iowa State beats Houston in a
unavailable,
conference championship,
yeah.
something like that where they have to do a onesie twosie swap. But
So that's my only hesitation to pushing Iowa State up to the 2 line because I think they might have been thrown on the 3 line already, and Illinois and Michigan State don't play in the Big Ten tournament until tomorrow. So Iowa State might need one more win to truly get up to a 2, and then on Miami and Louisville's side, you would have to think that the two of them are in the 33 that have been selected into the field already. Um, so how much now have they not thrown them on a seed line yet? Maybe not, but I think a 6 seed is on the cards for Louisville, and then potentially a 6 or a 7 for Miami. All right, Mike. Well, we didn't really get into it earlier when we talked about the bubble, but let's get to the team that has usually been accompanied by Miami in the bubble talk. That is Auburn, 17-16. They finish their season on Selection Sunday. They'll be 17-16. No team in the history of the tournament has gotten an at-large bid with 16 losses. Now, certainly there hasn't been a 16-loss team like this, to be fair, but they come up short against Tennessee today. They lead for most of the game, but they get outscored by 17 in the second half. Is this the curtains on the 2025-2026 season for Auburn?
look, I think one thing that the committee really has to look at is how did this team play coming down the stretch this season? And the answer to that is very badly. Right. This was a team that they did stack up some impressive wins early on in the conference season. They have probably the most impressive SEC win of the season at Florida. They beat Arkansas as well. Those are good quality. They beat St. John's in the out of conference, so that's a good win as well. But then you take that and you take what, five straight losses at one point. I think they lost nine of their last 12 games in the regular season, 3-9 in their last 12 games in the regular season, and postseason as well with that. I just don't see how you can let a team in that's struggling this badly with 16 losses. I know Bruce Pearl, or his son, wants to say something about how they absolutely deserve a bid. You can't go out there saying you deserve a bid when you lose nine of your last 12 games.
And
You
then
just can't because
they don't
you're not a
absolutely
tournament team.
deserve one. They might get one because the bubble is historically bad. They don't definitely deserve it though.
Deserving is an outrageous thing
Yeah.
to say for a 16 loss team.
Yeah.
Outrageous.
And look, he has to advocate for his team, but he can say, "Look, we're here right now. We gave it our best shot. We think our wins stack up against anybody, and we'll see where the committee puts us." It's not going to be a war crime if they don't get in.
No.
People they do not deserve to be in the tournament. Now, if you look at the numbers further, there are some arguments that can be made, but no, I mean, I don't see them I don't see them doing this for a team one game over 500. This
Yeah.
team that's one game over 500. It's not like they stunk early on. They had a bunch of players who were injured, and they have all now come
100%.
back and they have surged down the stretch, and they deserve to be in. Now, your recent play isn't supposed to be important, but you are supposed to be judged on the team that you're bringing to the tournament if you get selected. So it's not as if that had happened, where
Yeah.
all of their they had some key injuries. They really haven't, to my knowledge. And I do think the bid steal, they probably would have been in my field had Miami not lost today, like I said earlier. But the conversation needs to be had. I think they're probably out, but I would not be surprised if they're in. We said it last week, Mike. If you're listening to this, mentally prepare for the fact that they might be selected. I don't think they will,
I don't want to
but
hear that.
but
I don't want to hear
there
that.
there will be some horrendous outrage if they get in. Some of it rightfully so, probably some of it not. But um, interesting case here. They've won 6 games against the field. They have 4 quad 1 wins, but they have 3 losses outside the top quad. So, just 11 meaningful wins in the top 3 quads. I don't see it happening, but there are some arguments to be made, like I said. All right, Mike, we got 2 more topics that I wanted to get to here. It is, we're going to go to the Big Ten for the time being. Just one of the games today, really. It was the 8-9 game at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. It's a game that Joe and I have talked about quite often over the years because often our teams have been in it. It's not fun. But in the age of the expanded Big Ten, both these teams were going to the dance anyway, so it didn't really matter. But it's Ohio State who wins 72-69. They have completely separated themselves off the bubble. And Mike, maybe that's not such a great thing because they're probably going to be in the 8-9 game now rather than a 10 or 11. But the Buckeyes are playing some really good ball going into the tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. You look at where they were even 3 or 4 weeks ago versus now. This just seems like a much better ball club. Look, they got 4 straight wins, obviously highlighted by that win against Purdue, and then taking care of games that they were supposed to with at Penn State and Indiana. This Iowa one was also big though. This really solidifies their place in, and it gets them to climb a bit. And who knows? Michigan has very little to play for other than they're playing their rival, right? And so that's probably the biggest reason that Michigan wants to win this game, not because it's the Big Ten tournament, but because they want to beat Ohio State. And I think our colleague Joe Mead would agree with us on that one. But you never know in that game. Ohio State's still playing for a lot this season. If they win this game, they could potentially move up an entire seed line. So still lots to play for Ohio State. Things are coming together for them. They also have that nice win against Wisconsin a couple weeks back. That's been propelling them as well. So Ohio State looking way better. And I'm excited to see them in March.
Yeah, in terms of the matchup tomorrow, I just don't think Ohio State's a very good matchup for Michigan. I think they're sort of good at the same things to a lesser degree, but, Michigan hasn't been there. They're coming in for another early game, the same time that Ohio State had played the day before. We have seen numerous 8-9 winners beat the 1 seed because of this. So, um, Michigan do have their injury problems. Kaysen is out for the season. He had 8 points in that first game, but I think it's going to be really, really tough for Ohio State. Both of their lead guards are really going to have to show out, but you never know, really. Um, in this tournament, Ohio State's certainly playing a little bit better than they were a month ago when they had the Wolverines in Columbus. But yeah, that's been the main storyline here from the Big Ten. Is that really over the past month? Is that Ohio State has didn't look like they were going to make the tournament. It looked like Bruce Thornton was never going to get there, and now they're probably playing like a top 25 team the last month, and that continued again today over an Iowa team that sort of handed them a big L a couple of weeks ago
Yeah.
um, before that span. All right, the last thing that we're going to talk about here tonight, Mike, is a game that went final just before we came on. It was Luke Lux and the Florida State Seminoles trying to continue their run against number one Duke, and my goodness, were they close to doing it again. Duke wins 80-79. The Blue Devils trail for most of this game, and honestly, probably didn't even deserve to win it, but a three by Rob McCray as the buzzer sounded did not go in. Duke got across the line. Obviously, Florida State's been playing some great ball coming down the stretch, but were there some issues here from Duke that you think might be a concern?
Look, I think for Duke, this wasn't clearly a big game, but it really just the Achilles heel is going to be injuries for Duke. And can they be able to have a healthy team the rest of the way? Look, Caleb Foster, it sounds like he's probably not going to be playing for several weeks, at least until maybe the Final Four. And that's clearly going to be a big issue for Duke, having somebody that can handle the ball and control the game. Because they've got a lot of talent, but you need that team leader there that Caleb Foster is able to be for the Blue Devils. So I think that's the one big concern. Now, do you write this off as, hey, maybe this is just not something they're putting too much effort towards? And they're probably just focused on the NCAA tournament because this isn't that big of a deal to them. Yeah, sure, maybe you can do that. You can also say that Florida State is playing some of the hottest basketball in the ACC up to this point. Look, they're going to fall short. They're not going to be hearing their name called on Sunday, and we'll probably see them in the crown. But with that being said, Florida State's had a remarkable turnaround this year, and I think that's something that they ought to be really proud of because realistically, they were that shot going down to the buzzer away from being right in the middle of bubble conversation. And unfortunately, Florida State won't be able to hear their name called.
Yeah, Florida State, Mike, had they not just had a horrendous non-con, I think they'd be there. They had a couple of
Yeah.
close losses to some good teams, and then they lost by 36 at home to Texas A&M. They lost by 43 to Georgia at home. They lost to by 8 to UMass. They lost by 38 to Dayton. Like, though that team is not a top 100 team in Ken Palm, and they are the 24th best team on Torvik since January 1st. And you would think that that would probably go up a little bit after this performance because they were 16-point underdogs in this game. And they came right up to play with Duke here. I think there were some long term concerns. They simply just sat off of Caden Boozer and let him shoot. And you look at the percentages, and a little bit surprised they did that. He's just 30% on the year, but they dared him to shoot, and he did, and he was 0 for 5 from 3.
Yeah.
Isaiah Evans has the best game of his career, 32 points, 7 of 16 from downtown. They were a great Isaiah Evans game away from losing this one, Mike. Caden Boozer did his thing, 23 and 10, but as some of the more important role players are out of the game now, it's really going to be on the leaders for Duke to carry the way here, at least through this ACC tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at what they're going to need to do to win this ACC tournament. They're going to have some more career games for some of these guys.
Yeah.
Look, Caden Boozer didn't have their best stuff, but this game may have exposed what teams need to do with Boozer. Look, let him shoot. Let him shoot because he's dangerous when he can get down low and get into the paint. So maybe there's a little bit of a recipe for success for future teams, but I really think that Duke's success in March might hinge on Caleb Foster's health.
And
And back to UMass or back to Florida State rather. Florida State 67th in the net, which is a team that in no way would ever be
yeah,
playing in March Madness as an at large. But you look at their worst loss, their quad four loss to UMass, who is 204 right now in the net or going into today. Obviously, UMass has some kind of impressive wins on the year. They've now got a quad one and a quad two win. But that is, I think, an incredibly disappointing finish for them.
yeah, it was it. You know, they got the stop there on that last possession, and I think if there was like another second or two, McRae could have taken it to the hoop and probably gotten a whistle. The whistles were really bad in the first half. I thought Duke was lucky only to be down one. They called 14 fouls on the Seminoles in the first half, and I thought it actually evened out pretty well in the second half. It ends up being 19 to 17 in fouls, so I don't think Florida
Yeah.
State can really talk about that much because it did even out. But the I don't want to call it a junk zone for Florida State because it was a real zone, but they just let everyone else shoot that wasn't Isaiah Evans, and it kind of worked, at least to keeping easy twos out of the mix. But the rest of the team
Yeah.
outside of Evans, Mike, was 3 of 18 from 3. And now, of course, you do have to include you had a career game from your shooter, and you still shot 29% from 3. So perhaps that is a way that teams can attack Duke. They're like, well, we're going to live and die with your non-shooters shooting threes, and if they make them, we're going to lose, and if not, we might find ourselves in a game.
Yeah.
But all right, well, that is all we're going to have for you today. Obviously, the fourth window of games is still going on here, but we are not going to wait until after it because that would be far too late. But, Mike, before we move on, is there a game that you are looking forward to tomorrow?
Hey, one thing I'll just say, look out for the Ole Miss Rebels. They get back-to-back upset wins right now. They just come off a win against UGA. They're not going to make the tournament. They finished the year 4-14. So in SEC play, so no at large. They're going to have to run the table, which I don't really see that happening. But they're going to have an entertaining one against Alabama tomorrow afternoon. I'm going to be excited for that one. And I think the game that I'm really most excited to see tomorrow is Seton Hall versus St. John's. It's a chance for a Big East team to steal a bid, and I love Seton Hall's chances to do that.
Yep, we talked about it when we previewed the tournament, Mike, that I know Seton Hall wanted that third round badly. They weren't too happy with how they played in the first two games. They had extremely poor shooting nights. Well, they have their wish. 5:30 p.m. Eastern on Fox will be. And before we end it, every game in the Big East tournament is round 3 because they play a true round robin. So
Yeah.
I've caught myself a few times saying it, like, oh, round three in the Big East. Well, every Big East tournament game is round
Every
three,
game is, yeah, round
but
three, yeah. The
yeah, but
tournament.
that, and with my team sort of being eliminated now, Mike, and yours too, I think we're sort of lashing on to some other teams here to root for to get across the line. Certainly was Florida State there for
ILL.
about an hour, but now that they're
Yeah.
eliminated, I think it's going to go to the Pirates for me. So wish them luck tomorrow. I think I'll be back with Joe Mead tomorrow night, recapping the Big Ten tournament and maybe some other games too. But we're going to wrap it up here. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.